April 8, 1943, northern France. The runway is still wet from dawn mist, and the silhouettes of Focke-Wulf 190s sit nose to wind like hunting dogs. Ground crews move with practiced rhythm, fuel hoses, chocks, shouted checks. Somewhere over the channel, a formation of American bombers is climbing into the cold light. He straps in. Oberleutnant Gerhard Winter, 26, 23 victories, pulls his oxygen mask tight and thumbs the starter. The BMW engine coughs, roars, and the whole airframe trembles as if eager for blood. He's been told the Americans have sent a new fighter. The mess hall called it a joke, a flying milk bottle, heavy, slow, impossible to miss. Wheels up. He climbs through thin cloud until the fields of Picardy flatten into a quilt of hedgerows and river threads. His wingmen slide into position. The radio crackles with easy bravado. "Keep your eyes open," Winter says, scanning the high sun for glints of aluminum. "They'll be dragging their toy planes behind the bombers." There, specks ahead, resolving into a box of bombers with fighters riding herd. Winter narrows his gaze. These aren't Spitfires. The escorts look wrong. Bulky fuselages, stubby wings, huge radial cowlings that make the aircraft look swollen. He lets out a small laugh that the microphone catches. "Look at them. If they turn any slower, they'll stop." He rolls to the attack. Standard play. Dive out of the sun. Pick the last man. Fire and climb away. But when he commits, the formation of American fighters pivots as one. Wide, deliberate. No panic, no scatter. And the sky turns into a geometry of disciplined arcs. Winter feels the first flicker of doubt. Then the air itself starts to burn. 8 .50 caliber Brownings on each Thunderbolt open up at once. The traces aren't threads, they're bands, bright ropes of light lashing the air. A Focke-Wulf in front of him shudders, the vertical stabilizer evaporates, and the airplane breaks in 2 neat halves that tumble apart like a split toy. Winter yanks hard and dives. The American fighters don't chase for glory. They hold their wall around the bombers like iron shepherds. He tries a second pass from low 5 o'clock. No joy. Every time he edges closer, the pattern tightens, and those huge radials spit fire again. He feels the thud of rounds punching the air near his canopy, and breaks off, swearing. Minutes stretch into a long, unpleasant education. The milk bottle refuses to dance, but refuses to die. It takes punishment and answers with industrial certainty. Winter has fought over the steppe, dueled Spitfires over the Channel coast, survived ambushes and blind sun. He has never felt quite this, outmatched. Fuel low, ammunition lower. He runs for home. The airfield looks smaller than it did this morning. He lands hot, brakes hissing, and taxis in with his hands still trembling. Ground crew gather, eyes flicking to the bullet tracks along the tail. Winter climbs down slowly, helmet under his arm. "They're not clumsy," he says at last, voice dull with the weight of it. "They're built to kill in a way we didn't prepare for." Republic Aviation Plant, Farmingdale, New York. While German engineers were perfecting sleek, knife-edged machines, American designers were doing something that looked like madness. They were building a brawler, not a duelist. A flying engine, wrapped in armor. Its name? The P-47 Thunderbolt. Alexander Kartveli, the Georgian-born chief designer, stared at the blueprints with an engineer's stubborn pride. He wasn't trying to build a pretty aeroplane. He wanted something that could escort bombers to Berlin and back, fight at 30,000 feet, and still come home full of holes. So he took the most powerful engine in America, the 18-cylinder Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp, and designed the airplane around it. The R2800 was a mechanical cathedral, 2,000 horsepower, air-cooled, and strong enough to shrug off cannon hits. It gave the P-47 a top speed of 430 miles per hour, and the ability to climb higher than almost anything the Germans had. But it came with a price. The engine was huge, and the airplane had to be built like a tank to carry it. The result looked ridiculous. Thick, blunt, and heavy. When the prototype first rolled out in 1941, even American pilots laughed. "It looks like a bulldog trying to swallow a basketball," one test flyer said. They stopped laughing the moment they pushed the throttle forward. The plane didn't take off. It launched. By late 1942, the Thunderbolt began arriving in England. At first, it was hated. It was slow to climb, heavy on the stick, and guzzled fuel. British pilots called it a jug, short for juggernaut. But that name stuck, and soon it became prophecy. The jug wasn't about elegance. It was about survival. 8 Browning .50 caliber machine guns turned it into a flying buzzsaw. Self-sealing fuel tanks, armor plating, and sheer mass meant it could take hits that would shred a Spitfire or Messerschmitt. A P-47 could come home with half its cylinders shot out, and still fly another day. In Germany, engineers studying captured wrecks couldn't believe what they saw. Where they saved ounces, the Americans added armor. Where they chased finesse, the Americans chased reliability. They realized too late that America's strength wasn't just in machines. It was in mass production. The Thunderbolt could be built by the thousands, repaired anywhere, and flown by men who'd trained only months. By the time Luftwaffe aces like Gerhard Winter realized what they were facing, it was already too late. The flying milk bottle had become the sky's new law, not because it was pretty, but because it refused to die. England, spring 1943. Across endless rows of airfields in East Anglia, American pilots stand beside their new machines. Towering Thunderbolts gleaming in the morning haze. The ground trembles when they start their engines. The double wasp roars like a factory on fire. Mechanics shout over the thunder, and the earth smells of oil, smoke, and wet grass. At first, the men of the 56th Fighter Group hated the jug. It was heavy, sluggish, and unforgiving to rookies. But one man refused to let it fail. Colonel Hubert "Hub" Zemke. He saw something others didn't. The Thunderbolt wasn't a knife. It was a hammer. Zemke changed everything. He rewrote the rulebook. The U.S. Army Air Forces taught their pilots to fight high, to keep altitude and energy. Zemke did the opposite. He told his men to drop low, skim the treetops, and strike where the Luftwaffe least expected it. He called it hit and run at the roots of the Reich. Pilots thought it was suicide. Flying at 50 feet meant no time to recover, no radar support, no mercy for mistakes. But Zemke's logic was brutal and brilliant. German radar couldn't see that low. The curvature of the earth hid the Thunderbolts completely. By the time the enemy heard them, the fight was already over. The first mission came in September 1943. 3 Thunderbolts dove from 18,000 feet to just above the hedgerows of northern France. They roared across farmland, engines screaming, startling horses and farmers alike. Ahead lay a Luftwaffe airfield near Beauvais. Fighters lined up neatly, pilots climbing into cockpits, engines still cold. The P-47s came in so fast the Germans barely looked up. In 11 seconds, 4 FW-190s exploded before the flak crews could even reach their guns. By the time the smoke cleared, the Americans were already gone. Just echoes over the hills. That day, the Luftwaffe lost not only planes, it lost its rhythm. The German sky, once theirs, had changed character. They'd been trained to fight duels, altitude, elegance, timing. But the Jug didn't duel. It ambushed, smashed, and vanished. The P-47 was the industrial version of air combat. Less art, more machinery. And machines were what America did best. From that moment, the Luftwaffe's confidence began to crack. Every month, more Thunderbolts arrived. Every mission reached deeper into occupied Europe. And every German pilot who once laughed at the flying milk bottle started whispering the same thing over radio static. Thunderbolts above. Back in the United States, the war in the air was being forged not in clouds but in steel. In Detroit, Chicago, and Farmingdale, factory whistles replaced bugles. Women in bandanas and denim overalls worked 12-hour shifts beside conveyor belts that rolled not cars, but wings and gun mounts. Every 10 minutes, a new P-47 was born. The Republic plant at Farmingdale produced so many that the workers joked they could smell aviation fuel instead of coffee. They worked to a rhythm. Rivet, weld, test. The music of an industrial war. Each plane rolled out with its skin gleaming, its engine primed, its 8 guns waiting to roar. It wasn't just production, it was orchestration, and the conductor was American industry itself. By 1944, over 15,000 Thunderbolts had taken flight. They flew from England to France, from Italy to Burma, and everywhere they went, the story repeated. German fighters shredded by 50 caliber fire. German tanks blasted by rockets. German convoys left in flames. The Luftwaffe could replace pilots, but not fuel. They could build planes, but not enough. America was fighting a war of arithmetic, and it was winning by multiplication. Meanwhile, in Germany, factory floors echoed differently. Empty, cold, silent. Bombs fell on assembly halls faster than parts could arrive. Allied raids crippled production lines. Fuel depots vanished overnight. Engineers tried to keep up, but each new model, the FW-190D, the Me-262 jet, came too late, built in numbers too small to matter. The Thunderbolt, mass-produced and endlessly repairable, didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to exist in overwhelming quantity. By late 1944, Luftwaffe veterans would look up at the sound of heavy engines and know instantly, not B-17s, not liberators, but their guardians. The Thunderbolts had arrived again, each one a flying factory built by a nation that never slept. Winter 1944. Over the shattered fields of France, the Luftwaffe is dying. Not in one great battle, but in 1,000 small defeats. Every dawn brings the same sound, the deep, thunderous growl of radial engines echoing across the clouds. To German soldiers on the ground, it means only one thing. The Americans are coming. For the pilots of the Thunderbolt, the sky has become both workplace and weapon. They hunt trains, tanks, and anything that moves. When fuel trucks explode beneath them, the shock waves ripple upward like heat from a forge. To them, victory isn't measured in glory. It's in missions flown, engines running, and men coming home alive. In the mess halls of England, bullet-riddled flight jackets hang beside half-drunk coffee cups. Pilots share stories of dives so low their propellers clipped treetops. They talk about friends who didn't make it back, but never about defeat. Because defeat is what they were built to erase. Across the Channel, German engineers continue their post-mortems on captured wrecks. They take measurements, trace the cooling ducts, study the supercharger. They whisper the same word again and again. Unmatchable. They realize something their leadership never could. The Thunderbolt is not a plane. It's a statement. A flying equation that says, quantity is quality when your industry never sleeps. One engineer writes in his notes, "They have built an engine we cannot equal. They build 10 for every one of ours. That is not war. That is production." By May 1945, the war is over. Many of those same Thunderbolts are left standing on quiet runways, their paint blistered, their propellers still. But their legacy doesn't rust. It becomes a blueprint for jets, for industry, for an entire century of air dominance. The Germans once laughed. They called it a milk bottle, a joke, an insult to aerodynamics. But history doesn't remember laughter. It remembers what survives. And the Jug, the flying bulldog of freedom, survived everything.